This structure, much more massive than it shows here, was left standing by the Romans in 70 AD in order to give an illustration of how powerful was the fortress that they finally conquered. And this is my friend Henry.
Hi.
Henry, thank you for giving us that good sign. Now we're going to treat you to a picture of the old and the new. I'm not sure what that building is, but I know over here is David Hotel, which is famous, I believe, for peace conferences. View, Tower of David, very exciting, 10:30 Thursday evening. These pictures of the school are taken at 20 minutes to 11 o'clock. And this building was under siege and has considerable numbers of bullet marks, hand grenade explosions. This is our classroom. And maybe we can get an interior shot later on. But this is where our classroom studies are held, in the academic building. Entering in through the front door, here's the entryway into the main school building. I'll tell you the history of the building at another time, perhaps. Fascinating. No man land, and this is where, in 1967, Lebanon and Israelites clashed. The building was destroyed and left vacant for 20 years in tatters and torn until the school was able to make a deal to use it. We're avoiding the classrooms and the cafeteria and other buildings and just working our way up toward the roof. There's quite a few of these steps to be climbed, so I'm not going to turn on my camera. I'm just going to get out of breath until I get up to the top. I turned the lights on my camera because it was so dark I couldn't see my way up the stairs. The school is generally shut down at this time. Like I've stumbled onto the girls' dormitory up at this level. So I'll step out here and go out onto a porch or onto a balcony level. I'm pointing my camera down a couple levels now to the men's bathroom, the two lights along the wall, so that you can see that what was once the location of guns, turrets, and defensive positions, they were positioned so that anybody who came to the wall and to the main gate could be immediately shot as they made any effort to get into the main gate. In the conflict in 1967, the Lebanese occupied this building and were able to successfully shoot one of the men who was standing in this location. Also, I'm not sure exactly where, another man was killed with a hand grenade. And this is the roof of the Jerusalem University College, where we're spending 2 weeks, in the middle of October in the year 2000. Below, and on what I believe is the south side, yes, the south side, is a nice garden and patio area for the students. Just around the corner there is a cable that is still in existence that ran way out into the valley, where Israel was successful in bringing up ammunition and sending their wounded down across the Hinnom Valley, and the Jordanians never did discover how they were able to resupply and take care of their wounded. About 11 something Thursday night. I'm going to walk back to the school, which is at the other end of this defense area, and just across the street from the Tower of David, which is the prominent tower that we've been showing you, right at the Haifa Gate. We're getting close to home, close to the Gloria Hotel. But first of all, we have to go through the Joppa Gate into the old city. This was opened up for some dignitary, Hussein, I think. Just a short while back, this gate wasn't even here. Here is the original Joppa Gate, and I showed it before, showing the bend, which was a bend in the gate to make it defensible. From this angle, you can see through the gate, the massive doors, and from the Joppa Gate, the wall continues yonder quite some distance. It's 10 minutes after 11 on Thursday night, and we'll just walk you through the gate so that you can make the turn, and so that you can see that just a few feet down here, where the round sign is, we turn left in that street or alley, and up there about another 200 feet is where I live, in the Gloria Hotel. Corner looking for this bed. No, not that way. This way. And it's up there just around the bend from where you can see it. Streets, of course, are pretty empty at this time of the day. And here's the entrance to the Gloria Hotel. They were completely maxed out for reservations a month ago, or 6 weeks ago, with 255 people. Not a one of the regular guests showed up. Only 27 of the 34 ministerial students showed up because of the tensions. Over 5,000 hotel employees have been laid off this week.
Unrest has continued on and off, escalating and de-escalating and escalating at various points since then, but it basically broke into the early 90s. And as a result, Israel realized that we've got to find a solution to this now. The Arabs themselves were looking forward to this. Meanwhile, remember Pan-Arabism? Pan-Arabism? That kind of died out after 73 for obvious reasons. It wasn't really working, and the
I don't have my camera, so it's all you. Well,
There was 3 soldiers there.
there were date and palm trees. Oh, and there's the fruit.
Date palm trees.
Nah,
As you can see off the right-hand side of the bus, there's a nice date palm with dates visible on it, the fruit of the tree. In biblical Hebrew, this is a tamar. Our destination this morning will be the Jericho area. Now, unfortunately, Jericho is closed. We're not going to be able to get in. Jericho was a region in antiquity that was full of date palms. In fact, its name in Hebrew, Ha'ir HaTamrim, means city of palms. This is the name for Jericho. This is true in the Old Testament time period as well as the New Testament time.
The Damascus Gate.
This is, because of the problematic times, this is just a typical police force here at Damascus Gate, which is the main gate, the main thoroughfare that connects East Jerusalem to the north with the Old City and the Muslim Quarter. And the thing is, in the morning, as you can see, there's a few merchants gathered up by the gates. There's always a game that's played here. The merchants, the local merchants, gather by the gates, as they've always done, as their fathers have done before them, as their grandfathers. This leads right into the Muslim Quarter. It's named after Herod, although it has no connection with any Herod from history. There is a later, I believe, Crusader tradition about Herod. If you get a chance in your free time here to visit the Israel in the Old Testament,
Traditional.
the books of Samuel,
Ascension. Site of the Ascension.
David, when he flees from the city of David, because his son
Church
Absalom
location.
had led a revolt, a largely successful revolt at first. So
Bethany is in the distance. On the yonder hill.
Jerusalem and Jericho, the ascent of Adumim on the AA.
A modern
We are driving on the modern Jericho Highway.
Modern Jericho Highway we're traveling on right now. And cut into the rock.
This is the road that was developed by the Romans during the New Testament time period. This is a dangerous road, as we know from the parable of the Good Samaritan.
Good Samaritan Road.
And in a little bit here, we are going to take a left and depart the modern highway and drive along a smaller, narrower road that follows the Roman road to Jericho.
Follow the Roman road to Jericho as we take a left.
And we are looking out across the Wadi Kilt. Can you see Wadi Kilt here? We've traveled down the ascent of Adumim. We're looking across the Wadi Kilt, and off in the distance, you see that city down there in the plain? That is Jericho. Unfortunately, this is probably the closest we're going to get to Jericho. Jericho has been closed up by the military. And we were hoping to sneak in through the back door, but the IDF anticipated our plan.
Jericho.
Probably for our own good.
As close as we can
Probably
get.
for our own.
Trust the idea.
How long
We were stopped.
closed? Has it been closed for quite a while? Or?
Yeah, we weren't able to go with my last
Yeah.
group trip either. Jericho and the Herodium were the two places we weren't able to get to. So it's rather unfortunate, but you're here in an exciting time.
Oh,
You
yeah.
didn't see
See other things
the
we
things
can
that
see.
people just are watching on CNN. To come across a grassy oasis at a place like this. He leads me beside quiet waters. When you're traveling through the wilderness, water was crucial. You had to know how to get from when he was just a young boy, tending his father's flock, learn the importance of his faith, his complete dependence on the Lord. He would have learned these lessons in a place like this, in a terrain like this.
Matt, also when David...
Because bears would have been more abundant in the hill country in the Shephelah, where they're at that hill. It's just that the church needed to
Traditional
find a specific place
Mount of Temptation.
to place
with
their
Jericho
church and monastery to remember this
off to
important
the right,
event that's recorded
down
to us
along the
in
Jordan River. Correction, this is not the Mount of Ascension, this is the Mount of Temptation, traditionally, in Jericho, in the Jordan Valley, way off yonder in the distance. It's a little hazier, we could have seen across the Jordan River into Transjordan.
Malawi.
Wow.
Now you might have noticed that we're driving closer and closer to Jericho. Well, the reason is Badran, our bus driver, just found out that we might be able to get into Jericho.
Bus driver found out that we might get into Jericho.
We're going to try. We don't know yet.
We're getting closer and closer to Jericho, which is closed, but the bus driver says he might be able to get us in. So at this point, we don't know.
It's well worth the try. If we get a chance to go in, we'll visit the Old Testament city of Jericho.
This is the plain of Jericho. Not too far from the Jordan River now.
The same concept was used during apartheid in South Africa among the black African homelands, and it's recently been adopted here in the West Bank by the Palestinians.
You can't get in here.
Well, yeah, if you can't, that casino is probably closed right now because its lifeblood has been cut off to it.
We're waiting.
Gambling is strictly forbidden by the Quran
will allow
in Islam.
us special privilege to get
So for that
into
reason, Muslim
closed
Palestinians are not allowed to visit there, even though it's run by
Muslim
Muslim.
control. But we are still
Most of the people that the place that the people that supported that casino and settlements like Male Adumim, which I pointed out to you, the purpose of the Israeli government was to ring Jerusalem in with Israeli settlements, have it surrounded by Israeli settlements, so that if time ever came that this land had to be traded for peace, they would have a stronger bargaining chip. They could say, well, we can't cut off our settlements to the east in the wilderness from Jerusalem by giving Jerusalem up.
More Jewish settlements. They ringed Jerusalem with settlements so that when it came to the bargaining table, they would have to argue that we can't surrender our settlements. Coming up from Jericho back into Jerusalem.
Okay, let me tell you a little funny story about my experience with a sheepfold. Hold on 1 second. Yeah, I can hear you. We will get to now kind of be up there somewhere.
Do you see the car up in the hill?
Okay.
Or something that looks like it.
What's that? Yeah. Steve, we're gonna have to call you back when we get better reception. I think this settlement's down here. Yeah. Getting word. I've got Big Shot Road. Yeah. Yeah, what is it? It's kind of heavy, like getting hooked up on water. Modern war.
What war is that tank left from?
I don't know which war. It's possible it was just even pulled out here and abandoned. The Philistine garrison that was on the other side where the Arab village is today. That will give you some idea of what the terrain looked like in that passage. Next time you read 1 Samuel chapter 14.
So what's the name of that wadi?
Today it's called the Wadi Suanit.
Suanit?
Suanit. That wasn't the biblical name. Back in the Old Testament time period.
Jonathan, 1 Samuel 14. Jonathan's climbing up the hill with his armor bearer and destroying, I believe, 20 or so, was it Philistines?
Yeah, I wonder if vegetation.
Canaanites, somebody. Have to read that chapter 14 again. From the barren wilderness to the green of Jerusalem.
Right about a money. Gaza by name.
It looks like they just need to distinguish, or is it just the way they have it put together?
The red roofs are Jewish settlements.
Wow,
And over here to the flat roofs, they are Jewish towns. Very close together. Gibeah of Saul.
Where the young Levite and his concubine from Bethlehem spend the night in Gibeah, and there she is abducted and raped and murdered, resulting in a civil war, if you will, between the tribes of Israel and the tribe of Benjamin. And it all started there on Tel El-Ful, Gibeah of Saul. You can almost say that it was fought over a hill of beans. Bad joke. I'm serious. That's what the Arabic name means. Now, as we drive by, if we get a closer look, I want you to note the framework of the unfinished palace that's standing there today. That is a remnant, a relic from the Jordanian period in modern history. That was to be King Hussein's palace here in the Jerusalem area. We're only a few kilometers north of Jerusalem. And in 1967, when the Israelis captured this area, all construction of that palace, which is right in front of us there, halted, stopped.
On the side of the hill, Matt, is that what you're saying, at the palace?
King Hussein started to build dead center. King Hussein was, of course, never able to finish this, and so his beginnings of a temple up here, or a big house up here, remained unfinished.
I'd rather eat God's supplies.
There, Maccabean revolt began here. It's time out for lunch. And we're in a little park area, actually, where we're about to make a study of all of the vegetation and etc. that can be found in Israel. Just sort of a agriculture or horticultural study location. So we'll be going through this area about noon on Friday now. And this has been our source of transportation.
Are farmers. So if a prophet wants to make a point, he will use a parable, a homily that is from nature, from farm life. And this is why we have this park, to better understand what is written in the scriptures. So that's our aim, and today I'll try to show you a bit of what we do here. Okay, we're going to stop in a minute, okay? Here, you can stop here. Okay. Now, I do want us to get a bit of...
The Shefela.
The Shefela means the lowland or the foothills. Now, we call it the foothills, but if you look straight ahead, we can see that we are actually higher than over there. This is the coastal plain. We're about 200, 300 meters, going more up above the Mediterranean sea level. Now, you can make it into feet if you want or whatever. This is the coastal plain. This is Tel Aviv over there, the area, Jaffa. Yet we're known as the lowland, the foothills. Shefela is better than the foothills. Shefela means low. Why is it called so? We're higher than that area, but we are lower than what is behind us. And over there we have the Judean mountains, and over there we have Jerusalem, and it's probably someone from Jerusalem who's talking about this area. So this is why the Bible will refer to it as the lowland and not as the hills. Okay? Somewhat in 1967, prior to 1967, there was the border, which means that the valley, which is down there, and this village, it's a dead area which we cannot see, it's called the Natuf Valley. That is the geographical boundary between the Judean hills and Samaria. Okay? Okay, I think we'll leave the bus now.
We're rather close to a firing range. Rather interesting. I'm not sure which way the target is, but I hope the target is off in the opposite direction.
A bit, quite a bit. Okay, yes, those are bitter almonds. The bitter almonds are the wild almonds that grow here. Okay? The almonds are really wild trees that grow in our... Really? Ah. Okay, now here, you can just let the water here, because I want, for those who did not see a cistern, I like to make out the point that... Okay. This is not just to show. Thank you very much. Sure. Now, we have an expression in Hebrew that the road goes up to the cistern. You know, we don't have to bring it a place, it will fall by itself. Thank you.
Cedars of Lebanon.
Yes. Yes.
Several attempts to transplant it here.
They are so green.
It needs to be in this garden because we want people to understand
Now,
what the cedar of
what is
Lebanon looks
Solomon
like.
returning to our fig fruit for the people that were going up to Jerusalem? Yes, but this is what they were doing. They were producing here wine and producing here oil and selling it to the pilgrims coming probably from Jaffa or wherever they were coming, because not far from here was the main road going to Jerusalem. Yes, the main road. So this is a little chapel. And what is also interesting to see is this chapel was built on top of very small wine presses, because their presses are big. The presses that we have from the Byzantine period are big presses. It means that many people used to work together in a commune, whereas the one that we have...
And once again, we're looking at Samaria on the yonder hill.
Just a sign in it also?
The story of hyssop, we're looking at a hyssop plant, is most unique. Give me an opportunity to tell you about the hyssop.
How? Because they just collect the wood and sell it. Again, whoever sells white broom is not such a well-to-do man. And really, in this way, Job can show to what kind of a degree he went down, yes, what he was before. The Latin name is Sisyphus Spina Christi. And if you see, if you look at it, you can see that it has some thorns. And this is why it is referred to as being, yes, the Fuspina in Florence Christi, yes? Okay. Now, this is let's see how it works. Okay, so let's see. Will you be as kind and to give us some grapes from there behind? Give us a big bunch, if you don't mind. The vine is over there, just behind you.
There's nothing on it.
Okay, anyway, bring us something, whatever you can. Just bring us something for them. Now we're going to take off our shoes. Okay. Now we make believe about the grapes, we make believe about our shoes. The grapes, we don't take off our shoes. Okay, and now we start bouncing on them. Okay? That's the way you do it. Okay, since it's quite boring to do so, we need some extra help, and that help comes from you. That means that you are going to help us in the biblical way. Try to figure out what it's like. What is it? Exactly. Sing and we'll step on it. And it was done with singing. And if you don't believe me, you just have to refer to Isaiah and Jeremiah, who are talking derogatively about destruction. When you don't hear anymore the sound of the hey dad, and the word which was used, encouragement that was used in order for the people to tread was hey dad. So let's try that one and see how it works for us. So just say, hey dad, 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 hey dad. This is the word. Again, now this is a very simple one. Because in the more elaborate of the Byzantine time that are above there, which I didn't show you, you will have two vats like that, which means that the one will be flowing to the other, so that the impurities stay here, and there will be a clearer juice going on to the other vat. That's really a very, very simple one. Now let's go back to the trees. In low areas, in Israel it comes, the northernmost border of this tree is actually in the Golan. It has thorns, it has fruit. What else does it have? It has offshoots. Now, usually it grows wild. We don't grow it in an orchard where there are many fruits. In fact, when we planted it was planted by one of our neighbors here, the Arab colleague from the town of the village of Budrus. He said, "We are majnoon," which means a bit silly. Why do you plant this and you have here an olive and you have here all different things? Because you won't do it. Why? Because it has roots growing in different directions, which really suffocate all the trees which are in the vicinity. And those offshoots are usually cut off by a farmer who will use it once in a while when he is in the wheat field and it grows wild there and he wants to sit in peace and quiet and has a lot of nice shade. But here we're talking about something else. Thick, yeah? Okay.
Sycamore tree.
And this tree had two main uses. One, as I mentioned before, Solomon, I said it was used as a main building material. Now, of course, you cannot compare it with the wonderful cedar tree. However, there are some bigger ones. I hope we'll be able to pass by them. You'll see there are some huge ones. If you let them grow, but there are also a very important characteristic. If you look at the branches, you can see how upright they are. So it's a very good building material, yeah? Wood. Did he speak with you, the driver? No.
Here's the U.S.
Wrong number.
Close, yeah. Tell him look at it.
Yeah. Over here, and that nail has the flowers, lost in the natural, and so it was a man's job to climb on the nail, take the blossom, throw it down, Now this is really a description in all the Song of Songs, which is a love song. And that description, erotic description, comes probably from that profession of a man who was pollinating. Okay, so here you have it. Now, this tree, if we refer to it also symbolically, especially if we look at, I'm sure that you've seen in the old cities, the Arabs use it in their funerals, yes? Did you ever see that? Quite a lot, yes. The Jewish people use it in the schools, in the whole closed front, it looks like a sword. And in ancient times, it was a symbol of victory. It still is. When the Muslims use it,
Oh, yeah, this looks really ripe right there. Look at that.
So grab it.
Now I missed a lot of this. What fruit was this? Date tree.
Well, who's gonna eat this?
and just after that, the Jubilee, 49 sabbaticals every 7 years, and then the 50th year was private. You can't do anything. It says that on the sabbaticals, you're not allowed to sow, and you're not allowed to harvest, and you're not allowed to defend. So, in a way, this is a time when people remember that this land is not theirs, but there's tenants, and they're like a Bedouin, just moving, they're not here forever, the land is not theirs forever, but still it's a very, very difficult idea, because we know that some people got very hungry during that time.
Really?
Yes, yes, yes. People, especially in the, let's say, post-Second Temple period, this is exactly what our ancestors used to do.
Wheat and
Now,
barley
normally it
fields
wouldn't look like that. If it were last year, was
planted
sabbatical,
before the law
the
forbid
first
it.
rain was in January. Now, I assume just who will find. And it says so, yes.
Good
And all she
Shabbat.
does, right, and what she does. And she brings her bread and so on. And she's blessed that her candle will not blow out, which means she'll have a lot of oil to do this job at night. Is it a blessing or a curse? That's right. Right, okay. Hinting that the Jewish holidays are not just historical holidays, but they're agricultural, and it's always tied together. But there is a bit of a problem for the Jewish people to celebrate the Jewish holiday in its right time, because the months of the year are lunar months, which means that every year you're losing more or less 11 days. What we do today, we have a mathematical way in which every 3 and 4 and so years we add another month, and so there is a cycle of 19 months, 19 years, whereas you add that 30 years and thereby you're okay, and you celebrate the Jewish holidays according to the right season. So Sukkot will be at the time of the harvest, and Pesach will be the time of the barley, and Shavuot, Pentecost, will be the time of the wheat. But this is today mathematical. This is done mathematical. It does happen that we do celebrate Passover and there is no barley in the field. Now, it's not a problem because there is no longer a barley offering. But at the time of Jesus, the time of the Second Temple, it was a problem. So things could not be done mathematically. And the people that were in charge of deciding whether to add a month to the year or not were the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem. But it was a very elaborate method that he used. And I'm just going to tell you one thing that they did. The most important thing that they did was they went in the month of Adar and they went out into the fields. And they actually literally sent out people into many places in the country, and they had to come and tell them whether they think that the barley will be ready for the middle of the coming month. All right? So can you imagine that the whole cycle of a person's life was dependent on an ear of a barley? But this is literally how it was done. It was an empirical way. There's some other ways that also help them, like counting when is the equinox, the day, the night, and which are the same, and some other things, but literally this was how things were decided. Now we have to think about it that the time of Jesus is the time when there are already Jews spread all over. And they want to come for the pilgrimage. And yet they don't know whether they are going to come or not. And the Sanhedrin had the right to decide whether to add a month or not to add a month till the last day of the month of Adar. You just imagine yourself and you plan a trip somewhere. Maybe you're one of those who see, oh, that's a very cheap one, I'll do it this weekend, if you're not. And most people don't do it this way, especially in olden time when you have to carry lots of things with you. People
Another disappointment. The gates were closed and there was a large number of soldiers there just a minute ago. We were going to go to a highest point in the area, the high point of Gibeon, where Solomon had went to sacrifice on this high mount. I'm going to turn the camera around. And it's beginning to draw near to the end of the day. But way yonder, the high point, is the Olivet Range. So that gives you the proximity, shows you how far out the new city of Jerusalem does extend. However, this high point, where we've once again been rejected by the guarding soldiers, is a point that is common to both the Muslims and the Jews, and consequently it too is a very sensitive area and we were not allowed in. Once again, this is the high point from which we've been turned away, and the name of this hill today is El Samuel, and it was one of the points from which we were supposed to view some of the valleys and some of the battle scenes and some of the critical points of history.
To defer back to that monastery is about the old monastery. It's a
Home of the
Greek
Dead Sea
Orthodox
Scrolls.
monastery. All this land is owned by the Greek Orthodox Church. The land where the Israel Museum is located, the land where the Knesset, the Capitol building of the Israeli government, is all leased.
We're now leaving the Shafila and begin our descent down into the coastal plain. We're heading toward the Mediterranean Sea, of course. Jerusalem behind us.
Too hot. Oh dear. Where's your favorite? You know, when they were re-releasing Star Wars, I saw a bunch of the actors. They're all like really weird. I mean, like the ones that were C-3PO and Chewbacca and... You mean the voices of them? No, the people were just like not entirely there. 7 to 8 feet tall. And he also
Oh, you might, you know, take a look up to the mix. The red terra rosa soils are washed down by rain into these valleys here. They mix with the brown forest soils, and they make for a nice mineral-rich soil, which is excellent for the farmers. In fact, sorek in Hebrew means red wine. So this was probably a valley in antiquity that was known for its grapes and its wine production centers. You can see even to this day the valley is used for agriculture. The valley was a boundary in antiquity. It was a boundary that we read of in the book of Joshua, Joshua chapter 15, when we're given a description of the tribal territory of Judah. This valley served as a boundary between Judah and the Philistines. So the boundary came all the way down through this valley, and it ran to that ridge that you see way off in the distance, that furthest ridge there. That separated Judah from the Philistines. And in fact, in the book of Joshua, it's referred to as the shoulder of the Philistines, or the shoulder of Ekron, actually, because Ekron was the royal Philistine city that lay just on the opposite side of that ridge. To the north, we have the tribal territory of Dan. To the south and to the east, we have the tribal territory of Judah. And then right here, on biblical Beit Shemesh, where we sit, we have a Levitical city. So we have a confluence here of three tribal cultures faced against the Philistines. Now, if I could just kind of orientate you around the valley here very quick before we go over the biblical history of this area, beginning with this hill. This is the hill which contained a couple of the cities of the tribe of Dan. And if you look along the crest of the hill, just to the right, you'll see a hilltop with missing a few trees. Okay, just beyond that, we can't really see it too well, is the town of Zorah. The town of Zorah. And if you look on your brown map books, you could turn to page map 6. We're sitting here at Beit Shemesh, and we're looking across the valley of Zorah. And Zorah is a notable city in the Old Testament because it is the home of one interesting character. Samson. That is Samson's hometown.
Samson's
So we are in
hometown.
Samson's neighborhood. And in fact, throughout the Samson narrative, the Sorek Valley plays a key, crucial role in his role as judge. If you were to get on this road here and you were to drive down through the Sorek Valley and you were to take a right when you get to the shoulder of Ekron, you'd come to a very large tell that's just kind of sitting right in the middle of the valley. Now this tell is biblical Timnah, which is marked on your brown maps by the letter T. Timnah was a Danite town, but for the most part it was controlled by the Philistines. In fact, this is where Samson's Philistine wife lived. When he first married a Philistine woman, she lived in Timnah. Timnah was a city that went back and forth between the Israelites and the Philistines. It was a typical border town. Because remember, we are right here, right beyond us, to the west, was the traditional border between Philistia and Judah. When Samson became angry and he took the foxes, he captured foxes and tied their tails together and stuck torches in them and set them loose in the fields. It would have been fields just like these beyond us. This was a very agriculturally rich area during Samson's day, and even to this day in modern Israel. It's interesting, in Israel they don't have Smokey the Bear as far as fire prevention. A mascot, they've got a fox with its tail on fire. So certain images survive pretty long for years and years. It's really kind of fascinating the way the way the Jewish culture of Israel has reclaimed a lot of biblical traditions, especially here. This town, it's what we call Moshav in modern Hebrew. It's named Zorah, after the town of Samson. Now, Samson's town was actually further up on the hill, but you could see how the Israelis have taken place names out of the Bible and reclaimed them as their own, just in the same way they've taken images out of, for instance, the book of Judges. Chapter 6, and I'm going to read it to you.
1 Samuel chapter 6.
This is part of a literary narrative that we know as the Ark narrative. Now, to give a little historical background, in the previous chapter, the Israelites had gathered at a place called Ebenezer, which is further to the north. It would have actually been fairly close by where we were yesterday at Neot Kedemim, just to the north of Neot Kedemim. And there they gathered to do battle against the Philistines, who were encamped at a place called Aphek. And Aphek is actually on your map books if you want to look at it. Map 6. The Israelites would have been at the letter E, and the Philistines were at Aphek. And the Israelites were confident they were going to win. They were confident that they were going to defeat the Philistines. But why was this? Can anybody guess? That I know you've all read the story before. It's because they had the Ark. The Ark of the Covenant. They had God in a box. Literally, God in a box. Their faith was not in God, but in this highly decorated box that they like to carry around with them. Their faith was misplaced. And the consequence was, the Lord was not with them in battle. The Israelites were defeated by the Philistines, and the Philistines captured the Ark. This was a disastrous event. Not only did they capture the Ark, but they chased the Israelites back up into the hill country. They destroyed the city of Shiloh, or Shiloh as we know in English. They destroyed the tabernacle. This marked the end of Eli, the high priest and prophet, who died of grief over the death of his 2 sons. The tabernacle was torn apart. And this had a profound effect on the Israelites. So much so that they barely even speak about it in the Bible. But it's mentioned in the Psalms, and Jeremiah even refers to it in the book of Jeremiah. The destruction of the tabernacle at Shiloh was a terrible event in the history of the Israelites. And it was something that they had to live with because the Philistines captured the Ark and took it back to Philistia. And once the Ark gets to Philistia, we have an interesting series of events that occur. Now, in the preview lecture, I tried introducing you to the 5 royal Philistine cities. Can anybody remember what they are?
Gath, Ekron.
Gath, Ekron, Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod. Well, reading through 1 Samuel chapter 6, you get an interesting little geography lesson of those 5 royal Philistine cities, because when the Ark is first brought to Philistia, it becomes apparent that they can't control it. That the God who is represented by this Ark is not a God who can be contained by this little box, but he's bigger. He's bigger than the expectations of the Israelites. He's bigger than the idols of the Philistines. And I just want to read to you from 1 Samuel 6 so we can reflect on that and see a little bit of the geography as well here in the Sorek Valley that's referred to in the biblical text. Now the ark of the Lord had been in the country of the Philistines 7 months. And the Philistines called for the priests and the diviners, saying, "What shall we do with the ark of the Lord? Tell us how we shall send it to its place." They said, "If you send away the ark of the God of Israel, do not send it empty, but you shall surely return him a guilt offering. Then you will be healed, and it will be known to you why his hand is not removed from you." Now, why is it that they're trying to get rid of the ark here? Because they had been struck with a curse. In chapter 5, we read of how the ark had gone from one Philistine city to the next. In fact, some of the Philistine cities refused to take the ark because everywhere it went, the Philistines were inflicted by various plagues. Plagues of rats, plagues of tumors, which can be translated as hemorrhoids, actually. The ark was placed inside the royal temples of the Philistines, placed before their gods as an act of submission, trying to submit the Israelite God before their gods, and showing that their gods had defeated the Israelite God. But every morning they'd wake up and the silent pagan statues were toppled over. At one point, even the hands of the statues were chopped off. So the Philistines quickly realized that they had to get rid of this ark because it had become a curse upon them. They had defeated the Israelites and captured it, but they had not defeated the God of the Israelites. The Israelites had placed their faith in this box, but the true God of the Israelites could not be contained in that box and could not be captured by the Philistines. So the ark had been in the land of Philistia for 7 months, and the Philistines didn't know what to do. So they called together their holy men to get advice as far as how to deal with this problematic God box. And they said, if you send away the ark of Israel, do not send it empty, but you shall surely return to him a guilt offering. Then you will be healed, and it will be known to you why his hand is not removed from you. Then they said, what shall be the guilt offering which we shall return to him? And they replied, 5 golden tumors and 5 golden mice, according to the number of the lords of the Philistines. For one plague was on all of you and on all your lords. So you shall make likeness of your tumors and likeness of your mice that ravage the land, and you shall give glory to the Lord, the God of Israel. Perhaps he will ease his hand from you, your gods, and your land. Why then do you harden your hearts, as the Egyptians and Pharaoh hardened their hearts, when he had severely dealt with them? Did they not allow the people to go, and they departed? Now therefore take and prepare a new cart and 2 milking cows, on which there has never been a yoke, and hitch the cows to the cart, and take their calves home away from them. Take the ark of the Lord and place it on the cart, and put the articles of gold which you return to him as a guilt offering in the box by its side. Then send it away that it may go. Watch, if it goes by the way of its own territory to Beit Shemesh, then he has done us this great evil. But if not, then we will know that it is not his hand that has struck us, but it has happened to us by chance. So what's happening here? They take a cart and they place the ark on the cart, and they hitch the cart to 2 ox. But these aren't normal ox. They're calving ox. Their calves are taken away from them. So the Philistines know that if the ox pulled the cart towards the territory of Israel and away from their calves, they would have been acting against their natural inclination, and that the Lord would have been involved. They would have not turned around and head back to Philistia and towards their calves. So this is an interesting little test that the Philistines have of gauging the situation. Then the men did so, and took the 2 milk cows, and hitched them to the cart, and shut up their calves at home. They put the ark of the Lord on the cart, and the box of the golden mice, and the likeness of their tumors. And the cows took the straight way in the direction of Beit Shemesh. They went along the highway, lowing as they went, and did not turn aside to the right or to the left. And the lords of the Philistines followed them to the border of Beit Shemesh. So the 5 lords of the 5 Philistine cities walked along with the cart, observing it, to make certain of what would happen. And they walked to the border. Now remember, the border ran along the shoulder of Ekron, which is off there in the distance. And you could see how Philistine royal officials could gather up on that ridge and be able to peer down to the east across the Sorek Valley and observe the Ark of the Lord being pulled by 2 oxen towards Beit Shemesh. So you could just imagine the Philistines located up on that ridge off there in the distance. Now the people of Beit Shemesh were reaping their wheat harvest in the valley, and they raised their eyes and saw the ark and were glad to see it. So the people of Beit Shemesh were out here in the fields of the Sorek Valley, probably just to the west of us here. Because the ark first reached the wheat fields before it got to the town of Beit Shemesh. So if you can imagine between this tell and that ridge, that entire area there being fields, and the ark being pulled across these fields. The ark came into the field of Joshua, the Beit Shemeshite, and stood there while there was where there was a large stone. And they split the wood of the cart and offered the cows as a burnt offering to the Lord. And the Levites took down the ark of the Lord and the box that was with it, in which were the articles of gold, and put them on the large stone. And the men of Beit Shemesh offered burnt offerings and sacrifices that day to the Lord. When the 5 lords of the Philistines saw it, they returned to Ekron that day. Now, this is the event that we read of in 1 Samuel chapter 6. At the end of the chapter, though, it's almost as if the Israelites don't realize the lesson, the important lesson of the life. It becomes rather ambiguous. We're not really certain what happens, but they somehow mistreat the ark. And in verse 19, we see that the Lord strikes down many of the people of Beit Shemesh. And so they become terrified, just as the Philistines. This is a Levitical city here, and the Levites initially went out and prepared sacrifices to the Lord when they received the ark back from the Philistines. But when all these people died in verse 19, the Levites of Benjamin sent to the town of Kiryat Yearim, which is a Gibeonite city, and said, "Come, take the ark away from us." Now, why is it that they call to the Gibeonites at Kiryat Yearim? The Gibeonites, who were Canaanites, actually Amorites, more specifically, who had tricked the Israelites, Joshua, into making a covenant with them, were required by the Lord to be servants of the tabernacle and the ark. So for this reason, the ark was then taken from Beit Shemesh to Kiryat Yearim, and it remained in Kiryat Yearim until a king by the name of David took the ark and brought it to Jerusalem. Okay. Any questions about the Sorek Valley?
What direction is Hebron?
Hebron would be in the hill country, and we can't really see it, but it would be off in that direction. It would be south and to the east.
So when it says that Solomon fell in love with Delilah from Sorek Valley, and then he went...
Samson fell in love with... that's a good point. Delilah lived in the Sorek Valley, but we don't have any sort of town affiliated with her. It doesn't say that she lived in a town, just somewhere in the Sorek Valley.
And then he carried the gates of the city, doesn't say up to the top of, or carried something to the top of the highest hill facing Hebron.
Okay. Now the question, that's a very good question.
That's in Judges 16:4.
16:4. Now, if you read through the entire book of Judges, you see that there is tension between the Israelite tribes. Certainly they are unified because of their language, because of their faith in the Lord, but as well as their constant fear of the Amorites and the Canaanites around them. But they don't get along that well anyhow. There's all kinds of internecine fighting that occurs between the tribes of Israel. And there's always tension between the individual tribes, tension, competition, especially in the north with the huge tribe of Ephraim that is always getting upset at the other tribes around it. It's really kind of interesting to note next time you read through the book of Judges. Now, I said all that to say this. Samson is a member of the smallest and the weakest tribe in Israel, the tribe of Dan. So weak, in fact, that eventually they got sick of living here, where they couldn't control their own land, and most of them migrated north to a town that took on the name Dan. And when we're in Galilee, we're gonna visit the remains of that city, and we'll go over some of the Danite history there. But Samson belonged to this puny, weak little tribe. A tribe, I mean, look where it's located here. For the most part, it's the tribal territory of Dan, or at least where they were able to occupy, was specifically that hill. Now, it was supposed to spill over to the west, and there's some debate over how much they were able to control it, but the Bible tells us that they were not able to seize their own. They were never powerful enough to take their spiritual inheritance, so they had to leave. So for the most part, they were limited to this little hill here. And on the opposite side of that hill, you have the Philistines. I mean, this is a watershed area here between Philistine culture and Israelite culture, and the tiny, puny little tribe of Dan was caught between it. And so Samson rose up as a judge, and his entire career was spent fighting against the Philistines. He became a thorn in the side of the Philistines. So something interesting happens in the middle of the Samson narrative. He had just defeated the Philistines, and he was hiding out in the hill country of Judah. And the men of the tribe of Judah come to him and say, what? Will you quit messing around with the Philistines? Come on, we've got to depend on them. They are overlords, and what's not stated but implied is the fact that all the trade that came from the hill country, from Judah, had to go through the Shephelah and into the coastal plain. So without the Philistines, they're cut off from the Mediterranean. So the men of Judah are not happy at all with this judge from the tribe of Dan. And so they actually even bind him, arrest him, and take him to the Philistines. Samson breaks loose. He goes to the city of Gaza, rips the gates off the city of Gaza, and then brings them back up into the hill country and sets them down on a hill opposite the city of Hebron. Now remember, Hebron was the tribal capital of Judah.
You're not saying that necessarily happened here.
No, that didn't happen here at all. That was way to the south, because Gaza is the southernmost of the Philistines.
Okay.
If you turn to map, tell you what, we've all got most of us have our brown map books. So if you turn to, say, map 15, here's Gaza, down in the left-hand corner.
Got it.
And then Hebron, if you just go directly up the page.
Yep. Wait.
Almost due east of
Yep,
Gaza.
got it.
So you can see the relationship there between Hebron and Gaza. What's Samson doing? It was kind of an in-your-face for the tribe of Judah. He's saying, all right, you're asking me not to bother the Philistines anymore? Well, this is what I think of that idea. Boom, I'm going to take their city gates and leave them on your doorstep.
How many miles is there?
There's a scale at the bottom of your map book there. It's
Well, he
miles
carried
and
it from approximately Gaza.
up into the hill country.
Holy toilet.
So this is
He didn't
a-
have any oxygen or anything.
He didn't have any oxygen. This is a miraculous deed that he did.
Wow.
Across terrain like this.
Pretty strong. You know, when the Bible says, lift up your heads, O gates,
It's referring to
what is that, actually does that, what are the heads of the
lift
gates?
up your heads, O ancient gates. I think it just specifically means open up the gates.
Open up.
That's the way I've always interpreted it. Yes. Yeah. Now what's interesting about Samson and Gaza and Hebron, Samson of the tribe of Dan versus not only the Philistines but the tribe of Judah. Immediately following this event, we're told that Samson fell in love with a young lady who lived here in the Sorek Valley. We don't know specifically where in the Sorek Valley, but somewhere here in the Sorek Valley. And she's the only female in this narrative that's mentioned by name. And what's interesting is she's the only person in this narrative, the Samson stories, that bears a good Yahwistic name. Delilah. The ending is an abbreviated form of Yahweh, Yah.
Elijah.
Correct. Elijah, Jeremiah, all of these are names that contain the name of God. So that tells you at least that her parents believed in Yahweh. And that also tells us that she probably wasn't a Philistine. although she was in league with the Philistines. So it's interesting. You can almost speculate that she was a member of the tribe of Judah who had some sort of economic interest in cooperation between the tribe of Judah and the Philistines. That's just a theory, but it's something to note next time you read through that. All right, I want to give you some time to just kind of explore around here. Let's say 20 minutes.
We're all now searching a dumping grounds above the Zurich Valley where the truckloads have dumped the results of their excavation work, their archaeological digs, and we're all finding bits of pottery that date back to as early as 300 AD. And we're all finding bits of pottery. Some that's marked very clearly with inscriptions. But were not of sufficient historical value for the archaeologists to keep. They were just thrown away, but now they're valuable to us because they're maybe up to 1,700 years old. And so right now we say farewell to the Zurich Valley, and been looking for the footprints of Samson and Delilah from somewhere in this area, plus many, many other events. Pottery. Thrown out by the archaeologists.
Isn't that amazing? They just left all that behind.
Handles we often get excited about because in antiquity, when you'd store something in a vessel, if what was stored in there was very precious, a special type of wine or grain, you would put a stamp on the handle. And so, for instance, we have lots and lots and lots of stamps from Josiah's royal mint, as well as from King Hezekiah's royal mint. And these are very good for dating, and also very good for epigraphical studies of ancient Hebrew, because they'll have writing on it belonging to the king, or it will say from Hebron or from Gibeon. So this right here, I'm thinking might have this. Generally, stamps are on larger handles, but this one right here, you can see the little square there. That might be the top part of a stamp, but I'm going to take it back to the school and have an archaeologist take a look at it. We're going to clean it up and see if maybe there might be a letter or two visible. Then again, it might just be
A
chip. It might just be a chip.
Is that a stamp at the top of this? Is that what that mark is?
Yeah, that wouldn't be a stamp, because the stamp would be actually more pressed.
Oh, okay.
This is a nice handle though, from a large lithoid storage jar.
Oh my goodness.
That I don't know. And to be honest with you, the school has put us under a policy where when things are found, we're supposed to, like special importance, we're supposed to, because we're obligated by the government to turn them over to the Antiquities Authority, actually to the school's archaeologist who's representative of it. So that, they'd want me to actually take that from you. I can't take it to the expert and show him, but
What does this mean?
I can't date that for you. It would be, hold on a second, that would be, I would say, it could be Iron Age or Bronze Age. So it's Old Testament time period. Okay, what does this mean right here? This little number. You obviously were in the pottery dump.
Yeah.
Yeah. When the archaeologists excavate, they put everything in a bucket. Everything has to be controlled. They have to know specifically where it came from. They can't mix the buckets together. They have to know specifically at what level or layer that each piece of pottery was taken from. Then they soak it overnight. You saw the buckets being soaked at the school. Then they dry out that wet pottery, and at the end of the day, they go through and they do a pottery reading, which is kind of like what we're doing right now. You gather around a picnic bench and you look at this. The archaeologists look at this and say, "Oh wow, look at this! I found a piece like this last year at wherever." And then
You tell.
and then they record it.
Right.
And then if they don't need it anymore, they throw it out into the pottery dump. So this was written by modern archaeologists here, but this is, I mean, it's interesting in that you could see a little bit of how they keep records and study.
Can you tell if it was a right-handed or left-handed archaeologist?
No, is that?
That's a bone. That's a bone.
No, I never that. You know, it's very good looking at it. Maybe that's a bone.
This right here, I believe, is the base of a
Like a foot?
like a foot of a vessel.
Oh, wow.
So this is a nice one.
Hey, Truman, did you show him your... Like you wanted
This is a scraper.
No, he says that they're required to know red things of the antiquity.
I already had it
but all
focused.
these are all antiquities.
No, but this, I guess...
Anything that's really special? Oh, it is one of those gas little engines.
Examination and potential dating.
The location of biblical Gath, Gath of the Philistines. That would be Goliath's hometown right there. Now this is the closest we're going to get to it. It's actually not too easy to get to.
Goliath's
Would you like to get out and take pictures? Is anybody? Yeah. Why don't we?
This is the plain of Philistia immediately in front of us. And the high hill in the distance is the city of Gath and the town of Samson. We're going up to Azekah.
What does it mean in Hebrew?
Terebinth.
Turban?
Terebinth tree.
Terebinth tree?
The Elah Valley.
Terebinth tree. It's a type of tree. That's a general interpretation. There is a little bit of controversy over it, but it's generally what's recognized to mean. Now, if you look at page map number 6, if you want to pull that out, if you want to follow along, I just want to orientate you first of the geography and the geographical importance of this valley. And with that knowledge, you can then turn to 1 Samuel 17 and really see the events unfold before your eyes. But before we read 1 Samuel 17, I just want to point out the different places to you so you have a better idea of what's happening in this important biblical text. Now, the valley that stretches before us is the Valley of Elah. But before we discuss the Valley of Elah, I just want to again go over the regional breakdown of Judah, because this is one of the best places where you can see the distinction of the hill country from the Shephelah. You look way off in the distance, and you see that most distant ridge there. That is the central hill country. The central ridge route, or the patriarchal ridge route, would have traveled down the spine of that geographical feature. Located off to the north would be Bethlehem. You can't really see the remains of Bethlehem, and then Hebron would be further to the south. But those would be the two key cities on the central hill country. And then, of course, north of Bethlehem is Jerusalem. So Bethlehem, actually, I've never really been able to point out Bethlehem. There's no distinguishing features that I could find. I was just hoping to maybe find something there on the hill country, because it's important to know where Bethlehem is when you look on your maps and you look at the Elah Valley. If you want to go to map number 6, the maps that you mark there, you can see how the central hill country is connected with the Shephelah by a series of ridge routes. Now, we traveled down one ridge route, traveling what we call the Kesalon Ridge route, that connects with the Sorek Valley and connects Jerusalem with Beit Shemesh today. But there's another important ridge route that existed in antiquity that would have connected Bethlehem with the with the Elah Valley. Now, if you want to put your finger on Bethlehem and travel to the north a little bit, actually, let's go straight down past the E. You can see the E there. So if you want to draw your finger along that line, and then you'll get to a fork in the road, and we want to take the northern spur and go down past the H. And if you want to just follow that red line, then the southern spur again, you'll come to a three-way fork, and follow that all the way down into the Elah Valley. That is what we call the Husan Ridge Route, because it goes past the biblical town of Husan, which is marked by the H. That's the ridge route that would have connected Bethlehem to the Elah Valley. So this would have been the ridge route that a young shepherd boy taking food and supplies from his father to his brothers from Bethlehem to Elah. That's where they would have traveled. When David was hiding out at Adullam, which we have here on the map. Can you all see Adullam on map number 6? Unfortunately, we can't really see Adullam from this vantage point. And he longed for the waters of Bethlehem. His mighty men would have traveled up the Husan Ridge Route to Bethlehem from the Elah Valley. So you could see how important this ridge route was in connecting the central hill country to the Elah Valley. So we're standing on Azekah. Can you all find Azekah on the map? Is it clear there? Okay. Now looking across the valley today, you see where there's a T-junction in the road. Can you all see the T-junction in the modern road?
Yeah.
It's
down there?
down deep in the valley.
Okay.
If you're traveling south along that road and you take a left, and you're traveling into the Elah Valley, you go past those two roofs, almost that barn structure there, and you travel around the hill, and do you see where it zigzags up there?
Yeah.
Okay, just to the right of that zigzag, just beyond, there's a hill hiding it, but there's a tell just beyond that, and that's, in Arabic it's called Tel Shuwaika, but that is biblical Soko. That is the tell that is Soko. And then west and a little bit south of Soko would be the area of Adullam, although you cannot see Adullam. That's westward from this hill. But that would have been the area. So Soko is over by that zigzag in the Elah Valley. We're standing right here on Azekah, and the Elah Valley stands between the two of them, the two cities there. Now with that general knowledge, let's turn to 1 Samuel 17. Because at the beginning of this chapter, the writer of 1 Samuel 17 explicitly states where the Philistines were and where the people of Israel and Judah were. So beginning in verse 1, now the Philistines gathered their armies for battle, and they were gathered at Soko, which belongs to Judah, and they camped between Soko and Azekah in Ephes Damim. So Ephes Damim is a third city that's mentioned here. We all know where Soko is, and we're standing at Azekah. So the Philistines would be encamped somewhere between those two sites. And if you look down at that T-junction, there's a gas station and a barn-like structure that's actually an inn. Can you see that there? Mm-hmm. A little bit beyond that, archaeologists have discovered an Iron Age tell in a salvage dig that they did before the construction of those buildings. And so that would have been a place where Israelites would have lived during the Old Testament time period, and it's between Soko and Azekah. Therefore, a lot of biblical scholars feel that that's the location of Ephes Damim. So you can imagine the central Philistine camp being right there at that junction. Saul and the men of Israel were gathered and camped in the valley of Elah and drew up in battle array to encounter the Philistines. The Philistines stood on the mountain on one side, while the Israelites stood on the mountain on the other side, with the valley between them. So if the Philistines occupied Soko and were encamped at that junction there at Ephes Damim, and encamped all the way around here to Azekah, that would have placed the Israelites where? Right over here.
Yeah.
So if you see these white roof structures directly in front of us, and then there's a field down there covered with black tarp, you go across the street. The hills there across the street would have been the placement of the Israelite camp. And every morning, they would have walked up to the battle lines and stared across the valley at the Philistines. You could see how drastic the situation had become. The Philistines were about to take this important valley here. They had already occupied over one half of it. They had taken away Azekah and Sokol already at this point from the tribe of Judah. Then a champion came out from the armies of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath. Now where's Gath? Way over there, over on the other side of the ridge here. So you can. Caleb. So you can imagine that Goliath didn't have too far to walk to get to this camp. He just would have had to walk right over this ridge here. He probably would have walked along this saddle here, just to the north of us, to get to the main camp. Samson, then a champion, came out of the armies of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was clothed with scale armor, which weighed 5,000 shekels of bronze. He had bronze greaves on his legs and a bronze javelin slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and the head of his spear weighed 600 shekels of iron. His shield carrier also walked before him. He stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel and said to them, Why do you come out to draw up in battle array? Am I not the Philistine and you the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will become your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall become our servants and serve us. Again the Philistines said, I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. Now this is really kind of interesting when you closely examine this text. What we see here is champion warfare. This is not open warfare between two armies. Each army is being asked to choose one person to represent it. Now, champion warfare is kind of out of place here in the Near East. It's not common in Egypt. It's not common in the great Mesopotamian cultures that we see, that we know of. It's not common in Anatolia among the Hittites. However, we do see it in Greece. Now, what's the connection here? The Old Testament tends to speak of the Philistines coming from a place called Caphtor. And Caphtor is the biblical Hebrew word for Crete. So this indicates an Aegean origin for the Philistines. And this is supported by archaeology. Archaeologically speaking, the Philistines appear here in what is today Israel right after the destruction of the great Mycenaean cultures of Greece. So it's as if they got up and left Greece and traveled here. And we see a continuation of Mycenaean culture that developed in the Aegean, in the area of Greece. We see it abruptly end in Greece and begin again here in Israel. So it seems that the Philistines came probably right about the time of the Exodus, when the Israelites were moving in from the east, crossing the Jordan. The Philistines were traveling across the Mediterranean and occupying the coastal plain. And when you read this story here,
much longer than the Israelites.
no, they weren't.
So this is a parallel with the present circumstances.
It's a complete contrast to the present circumstances.
Contrast? Okay.
With the Israelis coming across the Mediterranean, occupying the plain, and the Arabs up in the hill country. There's a difference there.
Now, are the Palestinians a descendant of the Philistines, or
No.
is that just from the name?
It's just from the name. The name is actually taken from a Greek historian named Herodotus, who termed this area Palestina, Syro-Palestina, and that was taken by the Romans and applied to this land. And it's just been here ever since.
Well, in the discussion of Dr. Sabella the other night that they were here first, it must have maybe was a high in this case.
Well, I mean, the Arabs aren't descendants of the Philistines, and the Jebusites were not Arab peoples at all. So it's a very weak case if that's what the Palestinians, if that's the case the Palestinians want to make their political claims on. I don't think it's necessary for them to do that. It's not backed historically. There are very few archaeologists or historians who would support that claim. So getting back to 1 Samuel 17 here, we see this Greek style of champion warfare demonstrated in the person of Goliath. When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now David was the son of an Ephrathite of Bethlehem in Judah, whose name was Jesse, and he had 8 sons. And Jesse was old in the days of Saul, advanced in years among men. The 3 older sons of Jesse had gone after Saul to the battle, and the names of his 3 sons who went to this battle were Eliab, the firstborn, the second to him was Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest son. Now the 3 oldest followed Saul. But David went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's flocks at Bethlehem. Now we've already seen shepherds at Bethlehem. That'll give you some idea of the type of terrain that David faced, going from Bethlehem down the ridge route down here to the Elah Valley. The Philistine came forward morning and evening for 40 days and took his stand down there in the valley. So you can almost imagine him looking at that intersection there, taking his stand somewhere in that field with a black tarp just before the intersection. If you want to just imagine Goliath standing there heckling the Israelites who were on the other side of the valley. Probably. Then Jesse said to David his son, "Take now for your brothers an ephah of this roasted grain and 10 loaves, and run to the camp to your brothers. Bring also these 10 cuts of cheese to the commander of their 1,000, and look into the welfare of your brothers, and bring back news of them." All right, what's Jesse doing here? He's sending supplies to his sons, but he's also sending the choice supplies to their commanding officers.
Protecting them?
Possibly sending a bride.
My son.
Yeah. Take him out of the front line and bring me back the news. Make certain it's done. For Saul and they and all the men of Israel are in the valley of Elah fighting with the Philistines. So David arose early in the morning